29, 2016, the Joint Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence issues a Russian malicious cyber activity memo. On October 7, 2016, Secretary Johnson and Director Clapper issued a joint statement that the intelligence community is confident the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, and that the disclosures of alleged hacked emails on sites like dcleaks.com and WikiLeaks are consistent with the Russian-directed efforts. The statement also noted that the Russians have used similar tactics and techniques across Europe and Eurasia to influence public opinion there. Today, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI release a joint analysis report, JAR, which further expands on that statement by providing details of the tools and infrastructure used by Russian intelligence services to compromise and exploit networks and infrastructure associated with the U.S. election, as well as a range of U.S. government, political, and private entities. This activity by Russian intelligence services is part of a decade-long campaign of cyber-enabled operations directed at the U.S. government and its citizens. These cyber operations have included spear phishing campaigns targeting government organizations, critical infrastructure, think tanks, university, political organizations, and corporations, theft of information from these organizations, and the recent public release of some of this stolen information. In other countries, Russian intelligence services have also undertaken damaging and disruptive cyber attacks, including in critical infrastructure, in some cases masquerading as third parties or hiding behind false online personas designated to cause victims to misattribute the source of the attack. The Joint Analysis Report provides technical indicators related to many of these operations, recommended mitigations, and information on how to report such incidences to the U.S. government. You can see as we visit the Office of the Director of National Intelligence the very important seal that they show, which would signify its validity. Yes, indeed, that seal looks authentic, doesn't it? Which then kind of makes you wonder, whenever the report comes out, there is a disclaimer, Joint Analysis Report disclaimer. This report is provided as is for informational purposes only. The Department of Homeland Security does not provide any warranties of any kind regarding any information contained within the Department of Homeland Security, does not endorse any commercial product or service referenced in this advisory or otherwise. This document is distributed as TLP White, subject to standard copyright rules. TLP White information may be distributed without restrictions. For more information for the traffic light protocol, go to... Well, we will be looking at the TLP, but for now, let's go ahead and look and see what this JAR tells us. Summary: the Joint Analysis Report, which again, remember, is just for information, and they provide no warranty of any of this information. Dated December the 29th. Shows that the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the DHS provided these technical details regarding the tools and infrastructure used by the Russian civilian and military intelligence to compromise and exploit networks and endpoints. The U.S. government confirms that 2 different RIS actors participated in the intrusion into a U.S. political party. The first actor group, known as the Advanced Persistent Threat, APT-29, entered into the party system in the summer of 2015, while the second known APT-28 entered spring of 2016. Both groups have historically targeted government organizations, think tanks, universities, and corporations around the world. APT-29 has observed crafting, targeting spear phishing campaigns, leveraging web links to malicious dropper. Once executed, the code delivers remote access tools and evades direction using a range of techniques. APT-28, and it goes on. In the summer of 2015, the APT-29 spear phishing campaign directed emails containing a malicious link to over 1,000 recipients, including multiple U.S. government victims. In the spring of 2016, APT-28 compromised the same political party again via targeted spear phishing. This time, the spear phishing email tricked recipients into changing their passwords through a fake webmail domain hosted on APT-28 operational infrastructure. Using the harvested credentials, APT-28 was able to gain access and steal content. The U.S. government assesses that information was leaked to the press and publicly disclosed. This Uber report that cannot give you any warranties states actors likely associated with the RIS are continuing to engage in spear phishing campaigns, including the one launched recently as November 2016, just days after the U.S. election. They give you a list of potential names, and then they go on to talking about the actions to take using indicators. Now, all the links will be provided in the suggestion box. You can go ahead and read through this if you should so want. This is really just a tactic to convince you that something made up is real. They go on to talk about threats. Malicious actors may use a variety of methods to interfere with information systems. Some methods of attack are listed below. Guidance provided is applicable to many other computer networks, and it talks about injection flaws, cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, server vulnerabilities, and it talks about recommended mitigations. Commit to cybersecurity as the best practices. So now we're going to go into talking about all the different ways you can do cybersecurity. I'm sure there's some new software and programs for that. So this is where everyone's getting reprogrammed and retrained to reinforce that it's a security issue and that the threat was real. It's going to be very convincing talking to you about things that actually are real, like patch applications and application whitelisting, telling you how to restrict administration privileges, giving you really good advice because of this Russia hacking. Now remember, we're getting this from TLP White. This is the entity that gives this to the Department of Homeland Security to give to everyone, which they cannot give any warranties on. Just reinforcing what everybody already knows about firewalls and blocking attacks and removing your HTTP verbs from your addresses and yada, 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 yada. And you have to remember, all of this is to build up in your mind that there was some sort of document that was valid, that was given to these important people like Clapper, who's lied to us time and time again to ensure that we understand in our little brains that the election was compromised. Because see, that was the first tier of trying to get Trump out of office. It still continues now, a year later, and still with Russia at different angles. So many different angles. And all of this information you're looking at, it would be good to tell you that, yeah, this is a department that comes out of the UK. That's right. It's not even an American entity. It is from the UK. You know why? Because other countries can spy on other countries. But America, we can't spy within our own domain on our own people, allegedly. But the technicalities of that is that you hire people from, say, the UK to do it for you. And it's funny how they're also intertwined, how Russia's little people seem to be intertwined with the UK's little people, because that's how they get around doing it. So make no mistake about it. All this information that they're giving you about keeping your stuff secure is great stuff to know. They're not giving it to you. That information's not incorrect, but the reason they're giving it to you is completely fabricated. It's completely fabricated. But see, they fabricate from the beginning, and then they move away from that with fact. You'll see our little friend, our little Russian lawyer friend doing this. While we go through her deposition, her hearing, you'll see how she continues to go back to groundwork.
Now, I don't follow the stock market in regard to specific stock to see what was transpiring at this time with cybersecurity programs, but it's my hunch that there's been a little uptick in activity when it comes to cybersecurity. Because all of this has to have some sort of double entendre. There's quadruple entendres. There's so many hands that reach out to grab money, because this is what this is. It's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things, and they all intertwine, as you'll see. These groups of people, they come together and they all intertwine. So you can go ahead and continue to read through that. I probably didn't read each slide. You can go back. I'm just giving you my commentary in between, seeing how that works out. My goal is to provide you the information. You have the links in the description box. You can read it. You can pause it. You can go back. You can look at it. What they're telling you here is great information to know for security. It is overkill. It is overkill. They provide so much information, and that's part of the tactic too, is to drown people with so much information. They just don't know what to do. That's such a huge part of it. I like how the contact information at the end of this report, which is taken from a collaboration of UK individuals who put together cyber information. Recipients of this report are encouraged to contribute any additional information they may have related to this threat. Include the JAR reference number in the subject line of all email correspondence. For any questions related to this report, please contact the NCCIC or the FBI. Now, surely we have all come to understand that the FBI has been lying to us. Yes, I'm sorry. If you didn't realize that, I have to tell you, the FBI has been lying. They've been lying to us for a long time. There may be very good people working within the departments. I am sure that there are. But those that are at the top, yes, Jim Comey is a liar, treasonous person. I suspect that Ray is as well, because they're all covering for each other. This whole release, the memo, notice how Schiff comes out and he starts talking about how what you're going to see is really what it is. It's really kind of not going to be like... That's the tenderizer. This report right here that you just read through about the cybersecurity, that was the tenderizer. Notice the dates. These things haven't just popped up. They have been in the circle. President Trump, maybe he is a time traveler, because one of the very first things he said that they strung him up for was about the wiretapping, and they wanted to go ahead and pick at the specific vernacular used, but everybody knew what he was talking about. It didn't necessarily mean that somebody had a physical wire.
Yeah, so I'm really big about resources and where people get their information. I assure you, everything that I'm saying to you has been researched through online. So it's not anything that you can't find. You'll notice I have them listed here too, or you can go and see these reports, this joint analysis report. And remember, disclaimer, this report is provided, quote, as is for informational purposes only. So know your source. All that stuff that you just found out about Russia invading our elections comes from the Traffic Light Protocol, TLP, definition and usage. Traffic Light Protocol was created in order to facilitate greater sharing of information. It has 4 colors, and it's designed basically to delegate out the confidentiality. And white would be anyone can see the information. And you'll see how they share that. They don't really go into the sources they get that information from. It's just like a source. It doesn't matter. They are looking at disseminating the information. I'm sorry, delegating it out, like to who gets the information. They're not fact checking the information. There's nothing in here that talks about the this program here, this white program, disseminating or kind of going through it to see if it's true. That's not what their job is. So how does this tie into Russia? Okay, so again, remember I said the visa, you have to have, it has to be foreign related. So in walks who but Natalia Veselnitskaya. Okay, that's the only time I'll say that word. She comes in, and remember the name Browder that I mentioned earlier. She, when asked these questions before the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary Committee, she gave a glowing, honorable display of who she was and why she was here, and it has to do with Browder. Let me read. So she goes on to say that she is a citizen of the Russian Federation. She is a lawyer, and she's a partner at this consulting firm, and yada yada yada. And she goes on to talk about how she was involved in as a private attorney in the spring of 2001-2003. She established a private law firm, and she had been investigating the activities of a William Browder in the Russian Confederation. And the fact is that today he is not allowed to go back to Russia, and they're basically looking for him. And his friends and family, well, remember earlier, did I include that in the segment yet? There was a 37-year-old that died, his partner. Yeah, so William Browder was, she says, a tax fraudster who had been under investigation for 12 years. And he was convicted in Russia, and he basically left without ever doing any time because he didn't want to pay the taxes. So she's chalking it up to he was this financial crook is what she's saying. Okay, and that he's a former U.S. citizen, but he had given up his passport, and so that he wouldn't have to pay U.S. taxes. So after painting herself with the credentials, she says that it's Bill Browder that brought her basically to the U.S. and that he's been trying to prove something against her. On July the 27th, 2017, he showed up at the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing and told a few fantastic stories. I'm sure they negated what she had to say. Well, actually, he told a few lies, she says. What is more important is that he lied under oath. He not only deliberately committed a serious moral infraction, but he also committed a grave criminal offense from the point of view of the law. A citizen of Great Britain, Browder, who renounced his U.S. citizenship about 20 years ago out of A consideration used criminal methods to manipulate the U.S. senators and through them the public opinion of the USA. She says in all of her conversations regarding the Magnitsky Act. Now, Magnitsky is a poor fellow who was 37, who they killed. They really did. And this is why I know that she's a liar. She's a liar because it's pretty well known that this guy was murdered slowly. So she says that under the pretense of, she says it's solely around the fact that 2012, under the pretense of normalizing the trade relations with Russia dictated by a group of self-serving profiteers, an act was passed that was based on a story that has been used to incite hatred between our countries. She is such a plan. This is like a movie. This is a movie. She is like a Russian spy helping the people on the inside. Undermine social and mental relations, including the introduction of an adoption ban, and to manipulate the public opinion and politicians. She claims that Magnitsky had never been a lawyer, nor had he ever investigated or reported a theft of $230 million from the Russian treasury. And you see, guys, this is where it gets real. It comes down to money, 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 money. That's what it's coming down to with this guy here. And they're using that as a platform, and her affiliation with that as a platform as to how she is connected. And she continues to go back to that. There's very little conjecture, if any, with Steele. And asked when, and we'll get to that, if she knows him. I'm not going to read all of this verbatim, but link in the description box. Go ahead and read through it. It basically gives her, oh, woe is me, I fought against the sanctions, and everything that you hear isn't true. The, Magnitsky, who is dead, and who he cannot defend himself, she speaks very poorly of. Now, it gets very particular when she starts talking about the client she was defending and the group that he worked for. You can cross-reference some of this stuff on WikiLeaks, which I did, which led me to a Clinton Browder document. Amazing. Yes. It always comes back to Clinton. Isn't it funny? Everything, all these things always come back to Clinton. She says on December 4th, 2012, Browder sent a letter to the U.S. Attorney's Office against her client. And then she had to, work things around. And I guess that's whenever Lynch gave her the special passport, special visa. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that she was tied into the same people that are tied into the companies that deal with the Uranium One. And it's all right there. She has links to the people that are involved in the Uranium One deal. That is their contact. That was their pawn. That's who they brought over. And the moment she walked into the Trump Tower was the moment that those people decided that that was it. That was their little scheme in order to justify that FISA. But you see, the funny thing is they had already been collecting information. And the choice of words here, I was defending a client who had legally entered the USA, invested his capital that no one so far has been able to prove to have been dirty. They can't prove it. That's all they want to know. They can't prove it. Now, after going on quite some time about all this Browder stuff, things that have nothing to do with Trump, they then get to questioning her about the meeting that she had with Donald Trump Jr. And of course, the terminology is still very vague. All communications to, from, or copied to you, to, from, or related to any Trump campaign official or family members. Answers just not available or have never been available. And I believe that answer is to allude of something that it's not. Same answer would be for all the documents concerning the Russian influence campaign in connection with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Of course, there is none, but they're alluding to it. They've already put that in there. All documents concerning the hacked emails. Same thing, not available, never have been available. Please provide all documents related to the Fusion GPS or Christopher Steele. This is the important one because this allows her off the hook as far as being connected. It says not available. I have never been available. I do not know Christopher Steele. I first heard of him from the U.S. media. I did not work with Fusion GPS. I know Glenn Simpson, whom from 2014 she had viewed as an individual investigator analysis. So she's differentiating herself from the others that are connected to this fake dossier. And when she's, specifically asked whose idea was it to meet with the Trump campaign, she says that it wasn't a meeting with the Trump campaign. It was just a meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and it was a friend of hers, a good acquaintance. She didn't even give a name. Just a colleague. Informing the Congress members, And this part's very convoluted when she says that I do not remember from whom or at what time I first heard that I could personally express my request. During the meeting, when I was informed that I could hand over the request in person, I agreed. They asked if it was your idea or your request for a meeting. She said I never asked anyone for a meeting with the Trump team. She didn't ask to organize, namely a meeting with Donald Trump Jr. It was enough for me to hand over a reference outlining the request, which is Exhibit 1.1, around the end of May 2016. And again, she starts going back over the story about Browder, tying that in to see how that is relative, because that actually existed, partly. You'll read through this and see that basically when they're asking her anything specific about the meeting, there's nothing. There's no aha, nothing. It's just very, very, very bland. There were some good questions asked, like, what information did you receive about the meeting before it happened? All that I got can be found in the Goldstone letter. See Exhibit 1.2. They're all contrived documents. Again, she's beating that drum of the goal being a congressional investigation into Browder's activities, the motives and the sources of funding. You're talking about a lot of money. It seems legitimate. And she's talking about how he involved parties and his own self-seeking interests who lied at least twice in 2012 and 2015 to the U.S. Committee on Foreign Affairs. And now you can read. She's going to go into very lengthy detail again about Browder and that specific issue. She's focusing all her attention around that is the reason she came, because what she's doing is she's convincing everyone of the legitimacy of why she was here. That's the important thing, because it doesn't matter if she did anything wrong. It's not trying to prove that she did anything wrong, because remember, the goal is that if there is a reason to believe that there is someone foreign interacting, so that there could be a FISA issued, and so that there could be some sort of stretch even of the imagination that even will be legitimate, but you have to have a foreign agent to do that. And this is what's being set up right here, the foreign agent. And of course, no testimony is quite as powerful until you pull out a flow chart and start showing things like Russian Company 1, Russian Company 2, Russian Company 3. Because again, they're selling that idea. That's all that this is. They're selling the idea that her visit was legitimate. If her visit was legitimate, the FISA warrant would be legitimate. And that's what they're doing. This is CYA time. And of course, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. And you're talking about hedge funds of sorts. And Browder's colleagues who are in Wall Street. And you know that these people, if this were, if every single name mentioned were completely ripped to shreds, I'm sure they all relate back to Clinton. It always relates back to Clinton. And again, it's not saying that none of this happened. I mean, there's obviously documentation showing that Browder was involved in all these things. She just happened to be a connection point, and she was involved in that along the way. These people know how to pick their players. This is what they do. They pick their players to make it all come together. And while she drags Magnitsky through the mud, who cannot defend himself because he's dead, contrary to popular belief imposed by the same methods of the non-fact-based manipulation, Sergei Magnitsky was not posthumously convicted. On the contrary, taking into account the numerous statements and appeals by lawyers of Magnitsky's mother related to the unlawfulness of his arrest and to him being charged twice in 2008 and 2009, also taking into account clarification of the right of the late defendants to rehabilitation in court, according to the same procedure which is applied to the convicted persons who died. The court examined the criminal case against Magnitsky in full, and the case was dismissed in court. There have been cases of posthumous rehabilitation, even of convictions and consequent vacation of judgments against the late suspects accused in the Russian Federation, both prior to the case for rehabilitation of Magnitsky and after it. Any person who claims by Browder's behest that there has been the first in history posthumous verdict of the dead defendant in Russia demonstrates complete ignorance of the issue. Open legal sources can offer over 140 cases in which sentences were pronounced in respect of the late defendants. Such cases were in fact the ground for the Constitutional Court of Russia to express its legal position in 2011. That in the case of death of the defendant, the case cannot be considered on the merits, but only the grounds for his rehabilitation can be reviewed, and depending on the assessment of the evidence collected by the courts, the person shall either be rehabilitated or the case against such a person shall be terminated without admission of guilt and bringing in the posthumous verdict of guilty as it had been before 2011. And on, and the details go. Again, the names that are related go back to Clinton, and you can see this connection in what you might remember as being called the Panama Papers. Now, there is a partial list. I'm going to leave the link, of course, Wikipedia, take it for what it's worth, but it will link you into the Panama Papers, and it'll show you a full list of companies and individuals from May of 2016. And why that is important is because, as you're going to see, the names and companies of individuals are directly related to the bank accounts, namely the Clinton Foundation, the pockets of the Clintons. Imagine that. Just imagine how that could be connected. It's all interconnected. Again, these people, they all have, I'm sure the Clintons have one big fat Rolodex. And when they need to call in a favor, they pull that Rolodex out. Natalia was in it. And the fact is, this information about how the cash flowed into the Clinton Foundation amidst the Russian uranium deal, this is not new information. There were reports that were very comprehensive about this going on, in early 2015. It was the Clintons and the Podestas, because all the money went through the Podestas group. You'll see the links. There's proof that shows all the money transferring for these deals were going through the Podesta group. So basically you have Bill Clinton and, his wife and their family members and so forth. And they finance their way through with the company over in Canada for the uranium one. And, there's mines over in Kazakhstan that are really lucrative. And the sale was given to the Russians and really controlled the 1/5. And why it's important is because you have Secretary Clinton, Hillary Rodham Clinton, as the Secretary of State, who has the authority and power in the U.S. government agency to authorize certain transactions. And you need to have that, because if you don't have that, then these deals aren't going to go through. So the Russians gradually assumed control of the Uranium One in 3 separate transactions from 2009 to 2013. Isn't it funny? That's when she was in charge, huh? Canadian records show a flow of Uranium One's chairman used his family foundation to make 4 donations totaling $2.35 million to the Clinton Foundation. Those contributions were not publicly disclosed by the Clintons, despite the agreement that Miss Clinton had struck with Obama's White House to publicly identify all donors. So, as they're padding their pockets with 4 donations totaling $2.35 million, none of it's being disclosed. Of course, since this time, this is all very well documented in a documentary and I think book 2 called Clinton Cash. Quote here from the article: whether the donations played any role in the approval of the uranium deal is unknown. Is it unknown? It's not unknown to us. But the episode underscores the special ethics challenge presented by the Clinton Foundation, headed by the former president, who relied heavily on foreign cash to accumulate $250 million in assets, even as his wife helped steer American foreign policy as Secretary of State, presiding over decisions with the potential to benefit the foundation's donors. And that's what it was. That's what your pay to play is all about right there, guys. That is where it's at. In a statement, Brian Fallon, the spokesperson for Ms. Clinton's presidential campaign, said no one has ever produced a shred of evidence supporting the theory that Hillary Clinton ever took action as Secretary of State to support the interests of her donors to the Clinton Foundation. There's that key word. Nobody can prove it. Nobody can prove it. Well, I guess when everybody ends up suicided, if they get close, I'm sure for every one person that's been suicided and murdered, there's probably 100 that took the hint and turned the other cheek. They closed their eyes so they wouldn't see what was going on, because, they wanted to continue breathing. So while the American, political campaigns, they are barred from accepting any foreign donations. But the foreigners may give to the foundations in the United States. So the Clinton Foundation, this is one of the things that we don't hear about too much, even with everything we hear. The one thing that we don't hear, Clinton Foundation, it's almost as though they've dissolved, and now it's dissolved, it's gone away, and we're not going to talk about it anymore, like Ellen said with Jesus Campos. It's just, we're not going to talk about it anymore. That's what they're thinking. That better come up. I don't know what's in that memo, or at least the memo, but it's going to come back to this. This was huge. This was like monumental. It's going to come back to this. So many things are tied up in this uranium one deal. I mean, the amount of foreign money that went into the pockets of Hillary Clinton is enough to, well, if you go by the old laws, hang her. I mean, you're talking about willful misconduct and accepting money from foreign entities. And the projection that has gone on for years now, according to the collusion that Trump has with Russia. And the people that think that she's done nothing wrong and they want to say that Trump's going down for Russia, this information that I've compiled here, it seems maybe discombobulated because there's just so fucking much of it. And that's what they try to do. I think sometimes I'm wondering the WikiLeaks, that dump was just so fucking much, right? It's to the point where if you don't see the millions of dollars that poured in from foreign entities and what that meant, she wasn't allowed to take it, and what that meant. What scares me is that those favors are still expected. The people that she had offered favors to for the money that they gave, she didn't give the money back. And, you know, I don't think they really care that she's not in office. They expect their favors. And then it ties into the FBI and others going down. Mueller, Comey, and so many, McCabe, because there were people that were telling others in the Senate. Mr. Barrasso had mentioned that these transactions were going to give Putin a huge stake in the uranium, and it was dangerous. Whenever Putin was in a meeting with Rosatom's chief executive signing paperwork, there was knowledge of what was going on. There was knowledge of what was going on and that it shouldn't have been. But everybody was getting their hand greased and their pockets lined, so they just went ahead, business as usual, move it along. You know, and they did do certain appeasing things. Mr. Barrasso was assured that the American uranium would be preserved for domestic use only, regardless of who owned it. In order to export uranium from the United States, Uranium One, or ARMS, would need to apply for and obtain a specific NRC license authorizing the export of uranium for use. You know, special licenses, as we can see, aren't that difficult to come by. You can just fake information and get FISA warrants. You can fake information and get fake special visas to come do the things you need to do for your fake FISA warrants. You can do so many things when you are connected. And the money just continued to change hands. Before Ms. Clinton could assume her post as Secretary of State, the White House demanded that she sign a memorandum of understanding placing limits on the activities of her husband's foundation to avoid the perception of conflicts of interest beyond the ban on foreign government donations. The foundation was required to publicly disclose all contributions, and it did not. So then you have to ask, what good are these papers? What good are these signatures on these papers stating, I will do this, I will do that? And what good is it listening to people like Comey and people like Holder and people like Clapper? These people have stood with after giving an oath and lied time and time again. I don't care how many agreements are agreed upon. These people do not play by the rules, and they lie. They all lie. So we can't believe what they say. So does it really matter that they sign their name on something? Does it really matter that they put their hand on a book that would probably burn their hand off? I don't think so. Now, everything can be changed and altered and tweaked and padded and so forth. This is the way it is. But as money exchanges hands and you look at the people, I think it gives you a good snapshot. Link in the description box on this one again too, of course. OpenSecrets.org. This is a fun site to go play around in. A really fun site. I enjoyed it myself. Particularly if you go into the oil and gas, and you have the ability to select a summary, a totals, And all the money that has been given to Congress, you can select it down by specific senators or members of the House or all the Senate candidates or all the House candidates. You can put it in for all the cycles or just, the cycles of like the last election. And it'll show you who gave how much money to who. Which is very important because you have to understand and keep in mind it all comes down to the money. And then covering your ass. And usually you're covering your ass because you have to do something bad for those money exchanges, as we have just seen. And the Trump is because they couldn't have Trump as our president. You see, Clinton had this machine going on. All the gears were cranking, and she had everything just ready to roll. She had been working for years, her and Bill, and many others, not just her. The Obamas were promised a good piece of that pie. I am sure of it. The Bushes, oh, absolutely. And what's interesting is that when you look at and see the money that comes in and out, because when people give money, they're not just doing it. There is nothing for free. Nothing is for free. Bernie Sanders, what a nut job. I know some of you guys are probably Bernie fans, but, total whack nut, total paid off. He's just he's like a pathetic paid person. I don't know at what point in time he was in on that whole thing, but he was. So yeah, let's take a look at the money that comes through, particularly the oil, because when you have that going on, you have a situation where people are indebted. They are indebted, and unfortunately, this debt comes with blood payment, meaning war, a lot of the time. Because when you have to do something like establish a pipeline, because you have to make sure that your country is supplying the resources that people need, proxy wars are made and fought. And they go on for years. And then, like I said before, there's always going to be multiple reasons for these things, right? Yeah, there's multiple reasons. You got a war. And war generates poverty for the poor. And it generates wealth for the wealthy. There are people that make money in war. So we have our pockets being lined. And I just put the information up here specifically with the oil and who it is. But do play on that website. It's you can find out a lot of information, but as a snapshot, Madman McCain, and let me just say, most of these people, it's overwhelmingly Republican. Overwhelmingly Republican. I'm going to tell you right now, I did one other spreadsheet, which I highlighted it, and I don't have it highlighted here, but you can just read through it. First name, McCain. That's a kicker right there. They're down. Ted Cruz. The establishment. The establishment. You got very few Democrats. But before then, if you can go in the order of how much money, John McCain first, by far. Over $3.3 million. Yep. Ted Cruz, just about $2.5 million. That's some big money for such a young politician, per se. Who else you have? Oh, Mitchie McConnell. When you wonder why some of these senators do the things that they do, follow the money. It just goes back to it. We start getting all, why are they doing this? The internet's a wonderful resource. There's so many things. You just have to kind of know how to tie things together. Or maybe sometimes loosely associate things that you can't really prove to anybody, and people will say that you're a conspiracy theory, and you're a conspiracy theorist, and you just have to tell them to go, sit on it. Barack Obama, he was the highest paid Democrat highest paid Democrat from the oil companies at $1.9 million. Not bad, Obama. Now, I don't know some of these senators. I have to go through. The second highest paid Democrat is a female. And I don't know who that is. From Louisiana. I gotta look into that. There's something interesting with that, though. I guarantee you. There's a story behind there. And not so far behind her, of course, is Hillary Clinton at $1.4 million. These are interesting. Marco Rubio, more establishment, about almost $1.1 million. Yeah, so take a look through the list. You got Rick Santorum. I just made a note of, like, interesting. John Kennedy. Really mostly Republicans, but you do have some key Democrats, like, you know, John Kerry. Oh, you got Chuck Grassley up there. I thought that was interesting. You got Elizabeth Dole up there. Someone may argue and say, Anna, it's not bad that they're getting money from these people. The amount of money goes down pretty significantly. You got Harry Reid up there, a little under $400,000, and right under him, guess who we have at $394,000 is Jeff Sessions. Yeah, that's right, Jeff Sessions. It's going to get interesting with him real soon. Real soon. If he continues to sit on his hands, then we don't need any more proof to know where his fiduciary duties lie, do we? I don't think so. So we have, let's see, Jeff Flake, and we have Chucky Schumer, $307,000. Why are the oil companies paying him? Guess who else we have up there? Lindsey Graham. Yeah, we have Rand Paul, $280,000. John Ashcroft, $278,000. We have Luther Strange up there. And guess what? We have Al Gore. Al Gore at $157,000. Interesting. Kirsten Gillibrand, $118,000. Kirsten Gillibrand taking money. Bernie Sanders, nothing's for free. Bernie got $115,469. I wonder why he needs that money. Everything's for free. What else do we have up here? We have John Edwards up here. We have Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine at $79,000. John Edwards got more money than him at $81,558. I think these numbers got changed a little bit along the way. Because the amount is about $10,000 or more dollars off at the count. Al Franken got $36,166. Cory Booker, not these names that could be interesting to people. Cory Booker, $32,621. White House, Shelton White House, $3,483. Elizabeth Warren, $54,235. You got Kamala Harris up there, poor thing, only $15,075. Oh, and there's my favorite, Paul Ryan. No, he's not. 1.8, is that 1.8 million? Oh, he was raking it in. Go to this. Just go here. You know, Joe Biden. Sorry, that was Joe Biden. My bad. As I'm reading this back. But yeah, go look through that. It's good stuff. Mike Pompeo, 1.18 million. Steve Scalise, $1 million. Yeah, a lot of Republicans. Look at the graph in there. So the video might be a little bit off from the narration because I'm doing this thing a little bit differently. I know this was really long, but go go ahead and look through the resources. You can find the links and see the graphs. And the last thing that I really enjoyed was tracking Congress in the age of Trump page. Link in the description box. You can put anyone's name in. You can see how they vote with the president and what they voted, yay or nay. And it's funny seeing the really crash bottom low, 7.8% from like Maxine, impeach 5, impeach 45, Waters. All right, I hope I didn't update you with information, and I'm not going to make this any longer. I hope everybody has a fantastic week. And remember, they're always lying to us. Alrighty, bye.
So it would have probably been good to test out the mic and listen to segments before I patch together like a whole entire hour. And I'm not sure how it's going to sound at the end there, because it sounded like my voice went alien-ish. I will tell you that if you don't hear from me, it's not that I've been abducted, although I would have probably wanted to be. I'm just working on my taxes. So, I don't know. This is the end. Just testing the mic out. If anyone is still here listening, I need to send you a lollipop or something. I do. All right, have a great week. Bye.